Well, I guess the contrast for people to consider is 100% of our focus is on delivering relief to the American people, on getting the pandemic under control and putting people back to work. And we welcome support, engagement, and work with the Republicans on that. And the president has extended an open arm to that. The door to the Oval Office is open. He's invited Senator Capito to bring a group of her choosing to the White House next week. And we think there is opportunity for agreement to deliver on relief to the American people.
One quick question. A judge this morning struck down the CDC's national moratorium on eviction. Do you have a response to that and the administration's plans to appeal potentially?
Yes, I do. We understand, and this just happened as you alluded to this morning, we understand the Department of Justice is reviewing the court's decision and should have more to say later today. We also recognize, of course, the importance of the eviction moratorium for Americans who have fallen behind on rent during the pandemic. A recent study estimates that there were 1.55 million fewer evictions filed during 2020 than would be expected due to the eviction moratorium. So it's clearly has had a huge benefit, but we would expect that a response and any, of course, decision about additional action would come from DOJ, and you may hear more from them today. Go ahead, Christine.
Thanks, Jen. Facebook has decided to keep former President Trump off of its platform for now. Senator Ted Cruz tweeted the following: for every liberal celebrating Trump's social media ban, if the big tech oligarchs can muzzle the former president, what's to stop them from silencing you? What do you make of that comment? Does he have a point?
Well, let me first say that this is an independent board's decision, and we're not going to have any comment on the future of the former president's social media platform. That's a decision that it sounds like the independent board punted back to Facebook to make in the next 6 months, as I know you all have reported. The president's view is that the major platforms have a responsibility related to the health and safety of all Americans to stop amplifying untrustworthy content, disinformation and misinformation, especially related to COVID-19, vaccinations, and elections. And we've seen that over the past several months. Broadly speaking, I'm not placing any blame on any individual or group. We've seen it from a number of sources. He also supports better privacy protections and a robust antitrust program. So his view is that there's more that needs to be done to ensure that this type of misinformation, disinformation, damaging, sometimes life-threatening information is not going out to the American public.
You're saying more that needs to be done. Are there any concerns, though, about First Amendment rights? And where does the White House draw the line on that?
Well, look, I think we are, of course, a believer in First Amendment rights. I think what the decisions are that the social media platforms need to make is how they address the disinformation, misinformation, especially related to life-threatening issues like COVID-19 and vaccinations that continue to proliferate on their platforms.
I want to ask you also, Jen, about police reform. President Biden said he wanted it done by the first anniversary of George Floyd's death, May 25th. Is he confident that Congress can meet that benchmark? Where do those negotiations stand?
Well, the negotiations are between members of Congress. So, and he, of course, is confident in those discussions and the work that is happening under the leadership of everyone from Congresswoman Karen Bass to Senator Cory Booker, obviously Senator Tim Scott, who he called out in his speech just last week. And we are in close touch with, of course, negotiators and kept abreast of their progress, but we will wait to see what comes out of those discussions.
If you do the math, though, this puts police reform in some regard ahead of the negotiations, one would think, for the American Families Plan, the infrastructure plan, which he set an end of the summer deadline for. Is this now the president's top priority? Does he want Congress to tackle this first?
Well, I would say that the president believes Congress can and should move forward with multiple policies at the same time. And certainly that is what is happening on Capitol Hill. Those members who are playing central roles in these negotiations, and obviously they can speak to the frequency of the discussions and the status of them, and we defer to them. They will be important participants, of course, in any outcome of negotiations around the American Jobs Plan, but those negotiations can happen simultaneously.
Just finally, Jen, how does he see his role? I mean, he's the one making this call to get this done. Has he reached out to Tim Scott, the person who's leading the charge on the GOP side?
I don't have any calls or engagements to read out to you, but I can say that As you know, a number of representatives of the families were here just last week, meeting with some senior members of the White House leadership. The president has talked about how it's long overdue to put in place police reform measures that will help rebuild trust in our communities. He used his joint session speech, the highest profile moment in a president's first year, to talk about that and make the case. And but the negotiations are happening between members of Congress. He feels that's the appropriate place for them to be, and we will continue to use opportunities to call for this moving forward. Go ahead, Kristen. Kristen, I got confused. Caitlin, there's a lot of K's. It's a Wednesday. Go ahead, Caitlin.
Right. Kristen and I also have been dressing a lot lately, so it's fine.
Kristen has a very good mask on today. This Kristen, both of your masks. Go ahead, okay.
My question is on these restaurant funds.
Yes.
When will they start being awarded, and does the president envision having to ask Congress for more money for this?
Well, on the second piece, the first awards as part of the pilot program will be funded Friday. So we're
For this program, not the pilot, the actual part of it, not the pilot.
those who applied this week can expect up to 14 days on average from submission to funding. So it'll be a very rapid turnaround.
Okay, and does he envision asking Congress for more money for this?
When Congress comes back, we are happy to discuss the best ways to further support small businesses, including restaurants hurt by the crisis. So he's certainly open to that. And as I noted, there has already been a large interest in this program, and there are great needs across the country from these small businesses, from these restaurants that are in communities across the country. So we're happy to have a conversation with Congress about that.
Okay, and my question on the patents, you were talking about how the president last summer expressed his favor for waiving these so countries would be able to mass produce these vaccines once they're ready. Of course, that was when they were not ready yet last summer.
Yeah.
So just to be clear, is that still his position?
That has been his position. He also believes that there needs to be an internal policy process. That's what's been ongoing. The recommendation, the appropriate process, the recommendation to come from the USTR, and then any announcement about a decision would come from USTR. And that's how government should function and should work. And as and I noted in response to Andrew's question, there are of course considerations, but we're also in the midst of a global pandemic, and our objective is to getting as much supply out into the global community as quickly as possible in the most cost-effective manner as we can.
But what did he communicate to Catherine Tai, his trade representative, before these meetings with the WTO on this are underway?
Well, there have been discussions happening here through a policy process. I don't think his comments he made last summer are a secret. They're certainly not. But again, he's a believer that you need to have all parties at the table, everyone providing information, hearing details, pros and cons of every decision. And that's exactly what he asked for from his policy teams.
So given what he's heard from the policy teams, from the health experts, people like Dr. Fauci have weighed in publicly about whether this would be helpful in making vaccines right now, or if that would be further down the road. But is his position still what he said last summer, which is absolutely positively he will ensure there are no patents standing in the way of other countries and companies mass producing these life-saving vaccines?
That has been his position, but he is the President of the United States who believes in the advice, the counsel, the considerations of his policy teams, and that has been the process that's been ongoing over the last several weeks, and I expect we'll have more to say quite soon. It's also important to note, just in response to one of the things you said, that this is about the U.S. position. There would be an entire process at the WTO that would likely be months in the making. And that's just how the process works. So there's also a consideration leading up to that.
Okay, thank you.
Okay, go ahead.
Thank you, Jen. Yesterday you said that the CDC engaged with around 50 stakeholders when coming up with these guidelines for reopening schools. So in addition to the teachers union, the American Federation of Teachers, who are these other roughly 50 stakeholders?
Well, let me give you, I'm not going to read all 50, and I'm happy to send them to you after. But just as an example, while I find this lengthy list, they include the YMCA, they include the Council of Chief State School Officers, the National Association of School Nurses, the National Governors Association, Big Cities Health Coalition, Autism Speaks, Council of Great City Schools. So there's a range of organizations, and as we were talking about yesterday, the objective is to have a better understanding of implementation, how it would work, and ensure that these guidelines can be implemented and they would not provide harm to the communities that they would be impacting.
But can you just explain maybe just a little bit more, why the CDC needs all of this input from so many outside entities? Why can't it just come up with these science-based guidelines on its own?
Well, they do so to ensure that the recommendations are feasible to implement and that they adequately address the safety and well-being of individuals the guidance is aimed to protect. And that type of consultation is pretty standard as a part of their consideration processes.
One other topic.
Sure.